Okay, I'm going to start Garbaugust here on August 3rd with my first reading, and I'm starting with Sacrilege because the authors of this story that I read, Lorelei of the Red Mist, which is a novella, are two of the greatest writers of the 20th century, two acknowledged masters of short fiction. Lorelei of the Red Mist by, can you see it there? Leigh Brackett and Ray Bradbury. So how can you put Ray Bradbury and Leigh Brackett in Garbaugust when you're supposed to be reading garbage? Lovingly reading garbage. Lovingly referred to as garbage. Well, I think this story definitely applies because it is so much fun, so exciting, thrilling adventure. This is the original pulp cover from Planet Stories where it appeared in 1946. Leigh Brackett, if you don't know, you probably do know, but if you're watching this, but she started out as a pulp writer, writing what was called Planetary Romances or Sword and Planet type stories. She had a character named Eric John Stark, who's kind of a adventurer on Venus and Mars and places like that. Originally, later when she came back to the series in I think the 60s, she updated it to more realistic kind of planets. But at this time, Venus was thought of as a decadent, Venus and Mars at least, and probably Mercury and others were thought of as decadent worlds with their own dying civilizations and sort of post-Burroughs, post-Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of theory. And Eric John Stark was an adventurer, sort of an Indiana Jones inspiration. I'm sure, along with Northwest Smith, was an inspiration on George Lucas to create Indiana Jones. I've got some other pictures here. It was collected in this book of Planetary Romances by her, which is called Lorelei of the Red Mist, which is out of print. And this edition, see, it's credited just to her, but there's a notice of because it's got her other Planetary Romances in it too. But there was a foreword by Ray Bradbury talked about their relationship. They were both very young when they met. She was much more established. She was only 5 years older than Bradbury, but she was a mentor. He very much credits her with a mentor. With a mentor status, along with Henry Kuttner. He also credits, as far as I know, this is the only collaboration Ray Bradbury ever published with another writer. Leigh Brackett wrote many collaborations because she became a well-known screenwriter. She had around this time written a book called, a crime book called No Good From a Corpse, I think, and was read by the film director, whose name escapes me at the moment, Howard Hawks, who directed many fine films, and he hired her to work on his adaptation of The Big Sleep. So she worked with William Faulkner on that, and she went on to have a great screenwriting career, which didn't end, which included many of the great westerns that Howard Hawks wrote, including Rio Bravo, and finally ended with the first draft of The Empire Strikes Back, which was her first science fiction script, in which she completed the first draft of before she passed away at the pretty young age of around 65. Anyway, this comes out in 46. Here's some. I got some of the pulp stuff from it. It is, she started it, according to some of the information I read, she wasn't really sure where she was gonna go with it, but she had to stop because she got a big break to write The Big Sleep, so she handed it off to Bradbury, her mentee, her protege, as a word of finish. And that's one of the reasons I consider it Garbaugust. It's a little uneven in style and story, but it's so much fun. It starts out. It is a planetary romance like her Eric John Stark books. And then, strangely, this character's name is also Stark. How does she spell it? Spelled differently, though. She has an E on the end of it for this character, I think. I better go back to the story itself to find out. Because I'll mess it up. Who's unlike her actual hero, but she gave him almost the same name. I think she just liked the name Stark. But this Stark with an E, unlike her series character, is not a hero type. He's a small, sort of unhealthy, skinny thief who's on the run. He gets into trouble. They're on Venus. He gets into trouble with the law. He gets himself in a situation where he's about to die, where he's met by a Lorelei, a kind of a kind of a woman in the desert who's got some sort of, they seem like magical powers. It could be undiscovered science. What's her name? Ramna, I think. She makes a deal with him. She says, I'll save your life. I'm going to give you a new body if you do something for me. And he agrees. He doesn't really have much of a choice. He wakes up in this body of a big, burly barbarian guy. He's also chained and in a cage. This barbarian is called Conan. And it's an obvious homage to Robert Howard's Conan, which is intentional, because if it wasn't intentional, she wouldn't have called the island that they're situated on Crom Dua. That's Brackett letting us know that, yeah, I know I'm doing a riff on Conan here. What the hell? Let's do it. The red mist is a sea. It's got all this great pulp imagery and really colorful stuff. The red mist is a sea of gas, which is thick enough gas that you can float a boat on, or you can sail a ship on it, but thin enough gas that you can actually walk along the bottom, travel along the bottom on your own power. And in the middle of the sea is this island called Cromdua, or Cromdu, where the things take place. It's kind of there's a love triangle. Stark is his own mind is in the body of Conan, who was this Conan like character who was actually tortured until his mind went. So that's how the body is free, and it's a rivalry between these two powerful. Or actually, it's a love triangle. Between these sorceresses and this other guy, and the offer is that if Stark will use this new body to kill Ron's, I'm guessing I'm getting her name wrong, Ron's rival, he'll be given 1 million credits. They use credits in this time, like they use in old SF, they call everything credits. So it's a mix of sword and sorcery and fantasy and science, pseudoscience, and it's really fun to read, but it's not the greatest work by either of these writers, because it is kind of uneven. It starts out in the vein I've described, but as Bradbury takes over later, it appears, when he writes the second half of the story, it becomes more almost Lovecraftian. It is very much like in some aspects, it's very much like a Robert Howard Conan story, because you've got the powerful barbarian who's being forced by some wizards to try and do their bidding, but he outflanks them, or he might, at a certain point in the story, Stark realizes that he's not completely himself in this new body, that the Conan might be part of it too, and he sort of becomes this hybrid character of both the sneaky thief guy, who definitely needs reforming because he's not heroic in any way, and the heroic barbarian guy. It's quite poetic at the end how that part is resolved, and it's just a joy to read. But like other people have mentioned, I'm sure the people, I'm sure that the two authors knew that this was just going to be a ton of fun. They wrote it for pure fun, not to be deathless literature. It's a great read to come across, though. It's very easy to find. It's on Project Gutenberg. It's I would say about 75 print pages. There's plenty of versions of it, ebook versions for 99 cents on Amazon, but they're all just the Project Gutenberg version. So that's why I feel justified in including it in Garbaugust, even though it's two of my favorite writers, two of the best working prose writers of the time. I have another Leigh Brackett book I'm going to go with later in the month, I think, which fits Garbaugust's bingo card for another strange reason. That'll be fun to talk about, I think, too. But it was a great way to kick off the month of Garbaugust. For me, I've got some other stuff picked out. I'm probably going to go pretty hard with it because I've got 4 or 5 different things that I'm really looking forward to reading for the month. So let me know if you think I'm justified in putting this in Garbaugust, or whether you're outraged. How dare I call this Garbaugust garbage? It's not, of course. It's beloved garbage, but I don't think either writer would consider it their best work because of the uneven nature of it and how it's handed off from one to the other. I really don't think there's a lot of. I think Link Grammaticus had a video less than a month ago, I think, about different things, kind of red flags, not red flag, I forget what he called it, but I'll link it below, about different things that sort of guarantee a book is probably not going to be very good. One he talks about is collaborations, and there he creates many exceptions, but he really hits hard on the family relationship, like the father and son working together. There are exceptions, of course, to that, and there are exceptions to collaborations. Generally, they're not any writer's best work. I mean, there's a book by Joseph Conrad and Ford Maddox Ford. It's a collaboration, and you would think that would be. It's hardly talked about anymore. There's a novel by Mark Twain and someone that's a collaboration. The worst collaboration I've ever read is that I ever tried to struggle through was I forget the name of it. Deus Irae by Philip K. Dick and Roger Zelazny. So you got two fantastic writers who wrote a terrible book together. There are some exceptions, though. In science fiction especially, I can't think of any outside of science fiction. Ellery Queen was a collaboration between two cousins, I think, but I've never been able to finish an Ellery Queen book, so I guess for some people that works, but there's Pohl and Kornbluth. Frederick Pohl and Kornbluth wrote 4 books, including one of the true masterpieces of early sci-fi, which was Space Merchants. Great books they wrote together. They started out very young together, though. They might have had like similar like-minded thoughts. There's another one, though, and of course Fred Hoyle in later years wrote books with his son and Jeffrey Hoyle, and those are considered pretty good. They're not really the kind of collaborations you think of, like the Dune books or Lee Child and Andrew Child and these other, when these things are kind of just when the original writer's just out of steam or dead, and they try and cash in by keeping the franchise going. But I think Fred and Jeffrey Hoyle just enjoyed writing together. But those are the only ones. I can't think of many others that are really good. There's a book by William Gibson, and the other big cyberpunk guy. Okay, I'll drop the Infernal Machine or something like that, I think, which they kind of come off seeming like stunts most of the time. I think the only ones that really work are Poe and Cornbluth, and of course the Kuttners, C.L. Moore, Catherine Moore, and Henry Kuttner, a married couple who wrote many of their stories together and really got into understanding each other's style and would, pick up, work on each other's stories, sometimes under the name Lewis Paget, sometimes under both their names together, sometimes under just one name or the other, but they really sort of mixed their writing once they got married. So, but it's just an interesting thing about science fiction that there are a few people that did good work as collaborators. Not many. And it might be because in science fiction, the idea is so important. The concept, a new concept, was so important, especially in the historical era of science fiction, that somebody might get a really good idea, but not immediately have an idea of how to present it, and the other writer might go, "Oh, this is good. I can take it in this direction," and then you can come back and look and see if it goes in the other direction. Many times. Like, for example, Poe and Cornbluth would not plan their books like the Ellery Queen, like the cousins and Ellery Queen did. Poe and Cornbluth, one would just start writing, get tired, leave it in typewriter. They were roommates at one point. Then the other one would pick it up, write. They'd write one would write 20,000 words, and the next one would write the other 20,000 words, and the first one would come back, and they wrote 4 novels that way, or one novel and a few fix-up novels that way. So that was the method of composition, very much like Lorelei of the Mists, where one started it, the other finished it. They got a nice chunk of change for it, or probably not a very nice chunk of change for it, and it's well worth the read if you like action fiction and you're interested in this time of pulp magazines. So give it a shot, and I'll be back with another Garbaugust or something else later. Bye.